Hi there, welcome to the latest episode of my 10-minute moan, and the topic of this 10-minute moan is the absolute shambles of attempts at democracy within Holyrood yesterday. Now, before I start, people often ask, how can you support the channel? Well, you can become a member if you wish, or subscribe, but the easiest thing, the quickest thing to do is just click the thumbs up button when you see a video, and that'll help put it in front of more viewers. That'd be great. So yesterday, we saw the Labour motion of no confidence in the Scottish Government. Now, before we talk about that, I just want to look back in time a little, get a little bit of a taste as to what happened before the events, and then we'll look at what actually happened yesterday. So this was brought on by Humza a week ago, kicking the Greens out of power. And we saw a terrible reaction by the Greens. They weren't too happy at all. Patrick Harvey, he came out fighting last Thursday, making some bizarre statements. He said that the SNP had rejected right-wing views in last year's leadership. Now, if you think of last year's leadership, that was against Humza Yousaf, against Ash Regan, who then left to Alba, and Kate Forbes. So I would imagine, looking at the opposition who lost out in last year's leadership contest, he was probably discussing and describing Kate Forbes as right wings and saying that the SNP had rejected that at last year's leadership contest. He also said that the Scottish Government, Humza Yousaf, had given in to what he called backward forces in the SNP. So what he's describing there is their party, the government, and how they done and how they came about that decision yesterday. So he didn't only have a pop at Humza Yousaf last week when he left, and he declared that he was going to vote against him, and his vote of no confidence that later was withdrawn. But he also was saying that the SNP had given into backwards forces to make this decision. So he obviously wasn't happy with them. So we've got to bear that in mind when we get to what happened yesterday. We've also got to think back how those in high positions in the SNP have constantly slaughtered the Westminster government when they have changed their leader and brought us a new Prime Minister, which has been like a revolving door. Let's be honest with you, over the last few years. And each time the SNP have come out demanding, and for the benefit of democracy, then we should have a general election. And there have been comments made like the Tory party have got no right to select the Prime Minister of the UK government. The people should do that, which is a bit bizarre now because they're now going into their third leader on the trot when only the first one was voted in to a minority government by Scottish people two and a half years ago. So it's worth remembering, and a lot of the politicians that spoke yesterday before the motion, before the vote was cast for the motion, suggested the same, and they gave specific verbatim quotes from people within the SNP. But the SNP, if they were defeated yesterday, if their vote of no confidence had carried, Scottish people would have been asked to vote for an election to elect a new government for Holyrood, which would in turn lead to the people having some sort of say in who would be the leader, because they would decide how the makeup of government would be. So that is the background to it. So yesterday, the motion was taken to the Holyrood Parliament, and everybody voted, well, apart from the presiding officers, because the presiding officer doesn't get to vote unless it's a tie. So another thing that was pretty peculiar was, while the Humza Yousaf motion was still in place, the Greens had said that they couldn't vote for him because they thought he was a crackpot. So that vote hung on what Ash Regan would do in the Alba party with her vote. And she was willing to deal with Humza Yousaf to ask what he would do for her in return for her support in the vote of confidence. So we then get that motion gets taken out when Humza decided to say he would resign, but he's not resigned. He said he will resign. I don't know why. I was a bit disappointed that the Tories withdrew their motion. I would have liked that motion to went, because that would have speeded up the process of the SNP picking a potential First Minister, and if that was to fail, we could end up in an election. So I was a bit disappointed that that motion was withdrawn, to be perfectly honest with you, because it's the most likely one to pass, because the Greens had already agreed that they were going to vote against Hamza. So anyway, that, for whatever reason, that was pulled. The motion for support of the government as a whole, the Labour motion, was voted on. And surprise, surprise, the SNP, who were having a pop, the Greens, who were having a pop at the SNP a week ago, by saying they were giving in to backward forces within their government, decided to vote with confidence. Right? This is bonkers. Now, so obviously the vote, all the SNP voted, their 63 members plus the 7 Greens, so that gave the 70 votes in favour of the government and against the motion of no confidence. And it just makes you wonder, because all these people cry about democracy. And the other thing that was a bit bizarre, if you remember what led to the Butte House Agreement getting binned, was the Green Party members were going to vote on the motion of whether they supported it. They were calling an extraordinary general meeting, and within the next couple of weeks they would have voted whether their party should withdraw or remain in the Butte House Agreement, which kept the Greens in government. Now, when the Greens get sacked, Patrick Harvey and Slater and that wee guy, what's his name, Ross Greer, they were all bewildered, astonished, and some of them claimed that this was against democracy, because they had removed the right of their members to vote on basically how the government would look. Yet this week, when they had a chance to give democracy its voice and force an election at the Scottish Parliament, they decided not to do that, right? So the amount of flip-flopping, it's amazing, right? This interest I've got in politics is really, in the whole length of my life, quite a new thing, right? I've always had a small interest in politics, but it's been up, they've always been turned up in that somewhat, and that only goes back to November of last year, when Matheson, the wretched story about that and his phone bill, and I kind of, a wee bit more about Matheson in a minute, but you just sit there and think, this is so predictable. When these people, right, they sit and say one thing one week or one day, right, or over a weekend, and change their mind the next one, and just completely ignore what they said last week, last night, or before the weekend started. And the SNP and the Greens are always crying out for out democracy and demanding democracy. Yet, completely denied the Scottish people full proper democracy by denying us the right to this election that should happen. And it just, they flip-flop about it all the time. It's all, I don't know how they kind of get embarrassed, right? I'm absolutely sick of it. It is just, they spend more time arguing about shite than they do about what's important to this country. And when you look yesterday, when there was a fear of being held accountable to Scotland, by the outcome yesterday could have been we were looking at an election. The place was full. There wasn't a seat to be had. Even Sturgeon and Matheson somehow managed to vote, right? These are two people that probably couldn't point out directions to Parliament building if you'd asked them a couple of days ago, because they've not been for that long, right? They are amazingly turn up. And the reason they turn up is because their jobs were on the line. Let's not kid ourselves. Let's not kid ourselves that I've suddenly realised, I've got a duty to my constituents, I've got a duty to the country, I better get myself to Parliament, because that's your job. That's what you get paid for, right? And until their jobs are, because, if there was an election called tomorrow, they too are not guaranteed that they would get voted back in, right? They suddenly turn up. They're suddenly there. They're not there to debate anything previous to that, for weeks. I don't know when the last time Nicola Sturgeon was here, but Matheson, I'll come back to him in a minute, but he just miraculously turned up. He hasn't been since we were meant to find out the outcome of his investigation into his crooked £11,000 claim for his phone bill while he was on holiday watching football, right? But the minute his job's in danger, bang, they're all there. They're all there, right? So, and all claiming the expenses to get there, right? Getting to your work. It's a fantastic gig. It really is. And I'm losing faith in the system. I've lost faith in the SNP a long time ago, but I'm actually now starting to lose faith in the whole system because it doesn't make sense. I don't understand, for example, why if you're an MSP, you have a wage and you have a pension thing. And the pension thing for a normal MSP is similar to, if you worked in, private sector, right? So it is what it is, right? There's no point in sitting talking about it. It's just what it is. But here's the one I get, it's me, for the First Minister and, oddly enough, the presiding officer. You get a crazy pension. You get half your salary the day you stop being the presiding officer or the First Minister. Now, that doesn't matter if you're sacked, stepped down or voted out. That's what you get, right? And you go, how's that a thing? Right? How's that a thing? You get situations just now where people evidently are making votes not because they think it's the right thing to do for the country. They think they're doing it purely because they think it is the right thing to do for them and or their party. And that disgusts me. My nirvana would be 128 MSPs voted in to Holyrood without a rosette on. That would be fantastic. And it's not going to happen. It could take a couple of elections before smaller parties and independents had a proper chance of getting into the place in the first place. I believe we need to get rid of the SNP. Bury them, they're bankrupt. Let's just go for a throat. Let's just get a couple of elections, and that's another reason when you think about it. They can't afford elections, right? And they might have two in the same year. So let's just go for them, bankrupt them, and get them papped. That's got to be aim one, right? We then had a parliament where we're not, regardless, I don't care, I genuinely don't care who controlled the next parliament, right? Because we would have a parliament and a government that would not spend the next 5 years talking about independence. That would then give the small parties or independents a chance, and the current parties a chance to modernise, and smaller new parties and independents a chance to get their act together and think, how can we get into this game to try and make proper change and have a government and a parliament that do what's best for them, not the rosette on their chest, right? Because I'm sick of it. I'm genuinely sick of it. The normal parties need to modernise, and the actual building, the government, has to be a broader church. It was designed, let's face it, to have, the way the votes go, to have minority governments and coalitions and stuff, right? It's evident the way that the regional lists work. That was the plan 20 odd years ago when they decided to have a Scottish Parliament. And I know, I wasn't that keen on that first, but now the more I think about it, at least it would give us a chance to get people in a building and talk, get people in a building to plan, get people in a building to debate and come up with a consensus, rather than this guy says the sky's blue, so by default this guy has to say it's not, right? This guy says the grass is green, and by default this guy has to say no, it's not, right? Because that's what we've got to know. It is just a mad place that works in a mad way. And I wouldn't mind if we didn't have a Scottish Parliament, right? But we've got one. So we just got to say, well, that's the rules. What have we got? How do we deal with it? What's the best way to run it? And it ain't what we've got now. It's just madness. So anyway, I babbled on a wee bit more than my 10 minutes in this one. Get caught in a thought and away I went. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you've not already done so, please subscribe. And unless the mad SNP or the mental, I mean, they're bonkers off your Rocket Green party, right? Unless you're any of they two people. Have a great day. Cheery bye now.